Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As Eshanique said, my name is Karren. I am the executive director of the Software Freedom Conservancy. And as the slide will say when we get to the next one, I have a big heart. I literally have a big heart. It's called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I'm totally fine, but I'm at a very high risk of suddenly dying. And I have a pacemaker defibrillator implanted in my body, which I can't see the source code to. So I'm an engineer turned lawyer, and I did all this research and found that I'm extremely worried about the safety and efficacy of these devices that we rely on. And as I lived my life with my pacemaker defibrillator, I found that there were ways that my device didn't operate as it was intended to. For example, I was unnecessarily shocked when I was pregnant. Anyway, all of that made this a really personal issue for me, and I have dedicated my life to software freedom. And I run the Software Freedom Conservancy, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to ethical technology. We do a wide variety of stuff, including standing up for the GPL and copyleft. We're the home for dozens of free software projects, and we're also the organization that runs Outreachy. So I've been involved with Outreachy for a long time, which we'll talk about, and it is now hosted at Software Freedom Conservancy. Oh, Marina, you're muted.
As for me, I was a software engineer and I was working on the GNOME desktop at Red Hat when the GNOME Foundation approached me and asked me to mentor a woman in my project. And then it turned out that to mentor a woman in my project, I needed to relaunch a mentorship program. And this is how I got involved with organizing GNOME Outreach program for women that later became Outreachy. And then, so that was back in 2009. And then in 2015, I was involved with more diversity, equity, and inclusion work in free software. And in 2015, I moved to a full-time role working on diversity, equity, and inclusion at Red Hat.
So I love this slide for so many reasons, but this is a funny slide because this is a picture of me and Marina. What year was this, Marina? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, it's hard to remember.
Oh, it's easy for me. I was 9 months pregnant in that photo. So that was 2012. You can see that Marina is holding a funny pair of pants. So this program was originally launched as a initiative of the GNOME Foundation, as Marina said when it originally started up. And the GNOME community has a tradition where every year it gives an award to one of the most outstanding contributors to the project. It's a big deal every year, and the person gets an actual pair of pants. And that year, the board voted to give the award to Marina. And I like to embarrass her, so I slipped it in here because it is like an extremely prestigious award in the community. And it was not, there's never been a pants award more deserved than the one that Marina got. And Marina got her award for helping to improve diversity and inclusion in the GNOME community. And even though it was so long ago, but it still makes me smile just to see that.
Yeah, Karren, and it was such a highlight of our collaboration together. And then looking back, this was only the beginning. And so going back to how Outreachy started, it started as a program for women. We know that anywhere around the world, depending on the countries, there are anywhere between 10% and 34% women in the technology industry in different countries. There is a GitHub survey that has shown that there are about 3% women in free software, and there are also 1% non-binary people in free software. And in 2006, GNOME was participating in the Google Summer of Code, as it has been through all these years. And it received about 181 applications, and none of them appeared to be from women. And that's when Hannah Wallach, Chris Ball, and Vincent Oons decided to start GNOME Women's Summer Outreach Program. So they've invited women specifically to work on GNOME projects, and they had a lot of interest, and they had 6 interns participating with GNOME in 2006 as part of that program. And on the next slide, we have a flyer for it. And this flyer was designed by Maureen Duffy, who also did a lot of other great artwork for Outreachy over the years. And then the program didn't run for several years. And this brings us to this desktop summit in 2009, when the GNOME and KDE communities came together. Both Karren and I were there, but we didn't know each other then. And this events at the desktop summit have really pushed us together and foreshadowed what was to come. You can kind of see me in the center in a flowery, colorful shirt. But generally speaking, there are very few women in that picture. So the diversity, the gender diversity of the GNOME community did not improve between 2006, that first effort in 2006 and 2009. And another person who you can see in this picture is Stormy Peters. She was the executive director of the GNOME Foundation at the time, and she really helped me relaunch the outreach program for women. So it was after that summit that the GNOME Foundation board approached me and asked me to mentor a woman, which turned out that we needed to relaunch the outreach program for women. Next slide.
Now the relaunch, I just want to chime in. The relaunch was really like a rethinking of the way the program was run, and so it was a relaunch of something that already existed. But when we talk about the history of Outreachy, we really consider that was where our program was born, was in 2010.
Yeah, that's right. Because we definitely we talked to Hannah Wallach, Chris Ball, and Winston Toons, and we learned a lot from them. And we also talked to the 6 participants who participated in the 2006 round. But in many ways, we were starting the program anew, but we were just following in that kind of groundbreaking ideas that they had in 2006. And so this is our flyer from the first round in December of 2010. This was also designed by Maureen Duffy. And we're going to talk about how the program has evolved since then in different ways. Also, in parallel with starting the outreach program for women, we also started hosting women's dinners at GWADC, which is GNOME's annual conference. And this is some of the pictures from those dinners. And very appropriately, over time, this has evolved to be newcomer dinners or diversity and inclusion events. Very much like in the rest of the technology industries, the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives have often started out as being for women, but have broadened to cover other identities and diversity dimensions. But here are some of those early day pictures.
And they were really fun, and were a great way that we found our feet in creating the program. And I wanted to mention that there are a few people that are in those photos that I have met subsequently at All Things Open conferences. So it's pretty exciting. And maybe some of you are watching now who participated in those early gatherings. But as Marina was hinting at, our criteria stopped making a lot of sense pretty early. We started out, I promise, with the best of intentions, making a program to help include women, but we became increasingly uncomfortable with that as time went by. Our original criteria was anyone who identifies as a woman, which we thought was very inclusive before we learned a little bit better. And as you'll see in the next slide, as time went by, in 2013, 2014, we started amending to help expand along gender diversity lines. And so after consultation with different people in our community, we wound up changing the criteria to be women, cis and trans men, and genderqueer people. And the idea was to be as inclusive as possible and to really help the program include people who were being inadvertently overlooked or not welcomed in free software communities.
And then around 2014, a lot of companies, a lot of technology companies started releasing demographic diversity data. And particularly for the United States, they were releasing data about racial and ethnic diversity. And that showed that they had up to 3% Black people in technical roles and up to 4% Latinx people in technical roles. And from our experience, we knew that the underrepresentation is even more drastic in the free software community. So we saw that the next way that we could expand the program was for racial and ethnic diversity in the United States. By that time, we had help of Cindy Payares, who was one of the interns who participated with the program, and also of Tony Sieber, who was the general counsel for Software Freedom Conservancy and a close collaborator of Karren. So we had their help in drafting the language, doing the outreach, and expanding the program to people from racial and ethnic backgrounds that are underrepresented in the technology industry in the United States.
But as we went along with that criteria, we realized that even that was not really getting us where we wanted to be. It was very difficult to expand the program in different countries and different places, and really figuring out what groups should participate in the program, we realized wasn't really the right way to approach the problem. And so a couple of years ago, we changed the criteria to be, instead of specifying particular groups, we now say that the program is available to anyone who faces underrepresentation, systemic bias, or discrimination in the tech industry of their country. And so the idea is to really make the program available to the people who need it most. And the way that we do that is that we've introduced an essay question as part of the application process. We realize that we don't necessarily know the ways in which people are discriminated against or the systemic bias that they experience. And so we ask applicants to tell us themselves what systemic bias and what discrimination and have they themselves experienced? How have they been impacted by underrepresentation? And we say that the essays don't need to be perfect essays. We're not interested in great grammar. We just want to hear about your experience, what your life has been like. And so that is how we do the essay. And these are the questions that we ask. And I have to say that I've been really happy with how this worked out. I wasn't sure when we implemented this criteria if it would work out. And what I found is that these essays really bring home how necessary the program is. Reading about people's lived experiences is so powerful and makes me really confident that the internships are going where they need to go. I have to say that on several occasions, I have read essays that are so moving that they've brought me to tears. It's really quite extraordinary.
So now that we've talked about how we've expanded the program to different participants from different backgrounds, we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about how we've expanded the program to different free software communities. So in 2011, Karren became the executive director for the GNOME Foundation, and that's when we met and started working together. And Karren suggested that we expand the program to more free software communities. And this is a logo for the Twisted project, which was our pilot run. Twisted is also a member project of Software Freedom Conservancy. And in 2012, we offered internships with Twisted alongside internships with GNOME in the outreach program for women. And then over time, in 2013, more communities joined. We had Mozilla, Wikimedia, OpenStack join. We also had Linux kernel join. And this is where Sage Sharp, who has had a humongous impact on Outreachy over the years. This is when Sage got involved. They brought in Linux kernel as a participating community and served as a coordinator for Linux kernel. And over the years, we've had 139 different free software communities participate in the program, though not all at the same time. And we really would like to welcome more communities to participate. Outreachy is kind of like a microcosm of the free software community, and would love more communities to join. In the upcoming round, we're in the middle of a contribution period, which is part of the application process in the upcoming round. And we have 38 different free software communities offering 97 projects. We had close to 3,000 initial applications with those essays, and then 745 applicants were approved to participate in a contribution period based on their essays. So right now we have 745 people applying to work for 97, up to 97 projects. And as you can see, we can really use more communities and more mentors for the program. So this is how you can make a difference. And I really encourage you to get involved in that way.
And no chapter of the Outreachy history would be complete without even remembering some of the more difficult times. As you can see from the previous slide, where we have all the communities that we've been growing and growing with over the years. Not only do we add more communities, but also more internships, and also with more communities comes more sponsors, and the logistics got very, very high. With more sponsors to invoice, there was actually a moment after I left as executive director of the GNOME Foundation, where right after we had a delay between when the sponsorship funds that had been pledged for the program had come in and when the interns who were working on their internships were paid out. And that blip was shared with the community and was suddenly inflated in the press to be this huge story that the GNOME Foundation was bankrupted by the participation of by the running of the Outreach Program for Women internship program. And it was a big press situation, but in reality, the problem was merely a liquidity crisis where pledged funds had not yet come in. Some people call that a success crisis. So for the record, the GNOME Foundation was never bankrupt. This is a screenshot from the GNOME Foundation website. The press was so bad that the foundation was great at making sure that there was a good documentation up so people would find it right away. So in fact, the administrative fee that we had built into the sponsorship for the program created revenue for the GNOME Foundation. So it actually helped GNOME's operations. Now, it was an annoying press situation, but it actually was a good hint that the program was starting to outgrow the GNOME Foundation and for us to think about our next steps.
Yep. And one of the ways that we can trace the history of Outreachy is by looking at the logos. So this is our first logo that was created by Maureen Duffy. And while we really loved the energy behind it of we can do it, we can kick our way in, over time we learned that it is rude to show the bottom of the food in some cultures. And also the program has expanded beyond offering GNOME internships. So let's see our next logo. Our next logo was designed by an Outreachy intern, Liansu Yu, and she took this robot that was designed by a longtime GNOME artist, Hilke Bones, and then she created the surrounding picture. And so that's the logo that we used when the program expanded to include multiple free software communities, but while the program was still at the GNOME Foundation, and also only covering gender diversity. And then this is our 2015 logo, and it's our current logo. This is when we changed the name of the program to Outreachy. This is when we expanded to racial and ethnic diversity. And this is when the program moved from the GNOME Foundation to Software Freedom Conservancy. Marie Norden, who was also an intern in the program, and her mentor, Maureen Duffy, they created this logo for the program.
I really love how it looks like the logo is like stairs going up, like the internships that Outreachy provides is an opportunity to a step up to something, to a new chapter. I think you were the one who came up with those step idea, Marina, or either that or you were a huge advocate for it. I just love it so much.
I'm not sure. I think we just both loved it, but I think that probably came from the artists.
So great.
And then this is the current flyer for the program. So as you can see, we still call out and make specific invitation to the different groups that we've identified early on as people that we want to invite to participate in the program. But then we also have a broader invitation to anyone who faces systemic bias or discrimination in the technology industry of their country.
Oh, and I also see that this is a little out of date, so but that's okay. It's from a few rounds ago, but as we say, we keep improving and iterating.
Yes.
But the stipend is a little higher now, actually. We would not be able to run the program if we didn't have the money to be able to offer these internships. And so I have to take a moment to talk about the sponsorship of the program. And I especially want to highlight two really important sponsors to the history of Outreachy. The first one I'm going to highlight is Google, because when I was looking at the history of Outreachy and outreach program for women when it was at GNOME, Google is a company that has sponsored every single round of this program, even from the initial round and even from before we considered this program to have started in 2006. So, really they were one of the first companies to, help support the program on general funding, which is really fantastic. The other company I have to really highlight is Red Hat, because Red Hat, in addition to being a sponsor also round after round after round, also contributed Marina's time to running the program and getting it up and started and being supportive in every way of her work on it. And I cannot imagine that, I won't even say that, Outreachy would not exist if it weren't for Marina pouring her heart and soul into it and making it so good. So without these two companies, it's just, there would be no Outreachy. So they deserve a lot of credit. We have other sponsors too. I just pulled some of our great continuing sponsors who come back round after round and help us and help us provide the internships. And then you'll see at the bottom that that we also have grant funding from Ford Foundation and ARDC, and having this mix of funding where we have funding from companies, we also have funding from individuals, and we also have money from grant makers. Having that diversity of funding really helps us to operate the program in a really strong and independent way, and gives us stability for the long term, and means that we can offer more internships in a way that is most effective.
Karren, thank you so much for applying for all those grants. Yeah, and let's see how the program has been working out really well. We've had 779 successful participants so far. The internship success rate is 96%. And the reason that we have such a high internship success rate is that we have this contribution period where people are really able to work with mentors and demonstrate that they have the necessary skills to succeed in the internship. And we ask mentors to only accept people who have impressed them and have in fact shown that they have those skills. But then once people are accepted, we feel a sense of responsibility that the internship is a source of income for people for the duration of the internship. And so we treat the internship more as a fellowship where it is a learning opportunity for people. And we ask mentors that once they've made the decision to accept somebody, that they work with them during the internship at their skill level. With Outreachy, Outreachy alums have gone on to do all sorts of wonderful things. They've organized local tech initiatives. They've become leaders, for example, on nonprofit boards. They've gotten fellowships and won awards. And one of the things that we think is very special about the program is that we see that people from different cultures develop empathy for people from other marginalized groups, perhaps from groups that they were not aware of, or were not aware of the barriers that those groups are facing, or were not sensitive to. So developing empathy to people from other cultures and backgrounds is also part of the program.
So a couple of years ago, we asked our alums how they were doing, how the program impacted them, and asked generally for information so that we could have some idea of how the program was doing. We'd been collecting metrics somewhat informally, so we knew that a lot of our alums were speakers at conferences and doing really well and had employment. But once we did this survey, we had a much better idea. And from that survey, we had some really fantastic statistics. And so before they participated in Outreachy, only about 12% of our participants were employed, and afterwards it was 61%. And remember that not everyone who participates in Outreachy is looking for full-time employment. 96% of our alums continue to use free and open source software, and a big part of the program is introducing people to the values of free and open source software and its benefits. And 80% of them still contributed after their internship, which is pretty great. About 52% of our alums that responded gave a full-length presentation about free and open source software at conferences, which is pretty cool. And 98% of the students who responded, who were alumni, use free software in their school projects, and 67% still contribute to those projects as part of their schoolwork, which is great. 84% of the alums who were employed and not students and or having other paths use free software as part of that job that they have. And 44%, it's part of their job to contribute to free and open source software, which I think is one of the biggest successes.
And then we've had about 30 interns who became mentors for Outreachy, and about 10 interns who became Outreachy coordinators, so coordinating an entire free software community in Outreachy. 24% of interns became volunteers who work with Outreachy applicants. So word of mouth and people encouraging other people to apply is really big for Outreachy. And of course, we also have to balance that with additional outreach that we do to reach people who don't have that community connection in. And then 39% of interns became mentors in some capacity after their internship. And one of the things that Karren and I really love talking about is how there are some interns who have become grand mentors. And that means that they mentored somebody in the program, and then that person became a mentor themselves in the program. And we have a couple cases like that. And then I also wanted to say that if you've participated in a program as an intern or as a mentor, please say hi in chat. We would love to hear from you.
So I'm happy to report. That our most recent round had 70 successful interns. This is a lot for us. As you recall, we started out with cohorts of around 6 to 8 interns, and we've been increasing slowly over time. We got kind of stable at the like 45 or 40 to 50 for a long time, and we've been ramping up recently. And so it's pretty exciting. That was our biggest round yet. and we want to keep improving and keep growing because we know that that the ways in which, especially living in a pandemic as we are now, that the ways in which these things impact folks that are subject to systemic bias and who experience discrimination are not equal. There have been a lot of studies done recently and a lot of articles written about how inequality has been inflated during the pandemic. It's been exacerbated. And so, while there was the height of the pandemic, um, people with comfortable remote tech jobs had an easy time staying home and weathering out the crisis. But for people without those jobs, it became very, very difficult. And we realized that these opportunities were needed even more than they ever had been before. And so we've really done our best to try to increase the number of internships. And the response that we've had has been really, really fantastic. We know based on an increase in applications that the program is needed, and by seeing how our interns are balancing being impacted strongly by COVID in a continuing way, and and their internships and doing so well at them is it's been really amazing to see. And I think that we're gonna keep focusing on trying to get these opportunities to people who really need them. So I think we can move to the next slide. Oh, right. So the next slide is another thing that's happened recently, just in the last November. So still in really peak pandemic times, we hired Sage Sharp, who Marina mentioned earlier, as our first full-time employee working on Outreachy, which is really, really exciting. Sage was instrumental in getting the Linux kernel's participation in the program to be so wonderful, and Sage has been phenomenal at running the day-to-day operations of the program. And having a full-time employee is a huge step and improvement in the program. We also have a contractor, Anna So, who is also fantastic. And so having our program staffed up by people who are so competent. Sage, before running the program, was a community coordinator and mentor, and Anna was a graduate of the program. So it's great to have them in these leadership roles and doing such great work. So yeah, we could go to the next slide.
Yeah, I wanted to say about Sage that like Sage have really made the program what it is today by helping scale the program. They've created a custom application system for us that has this is custom to the application process for Outreachy, and they have also separated out this phase 1 and phase 2 of the application process, where phase 1 is people writing essays, and phase 2 is a 5-week contribution period. And what that did is that it really leveled the playing field for people to be able to prepare themselves for making free software contribution, but then not doing things last minute, because when they're accepted for phase 2, like that's when the time is really built in for them to work with mentors on their contributions, and everybody has that 5-week period. And then together with Anna, they've been running bi-weekly chats for interns, and have really created a very supportive community for our interns, where they have different topics that they ask interns to write blog posts about and to talk about, such as career development or adjusting expectations. And so Sage and Anna have really made this program as wonderful as it is today.
We have this slide up about humanitarian community funding because that's one of the biggest changes that has happened recently, and Sage and Anna have been major drivers of that too. So, so what we've done is that the way that the program has been structured traditionally was that when communities come to participate in Outreachy, we ask for them to have the funding for at least one intern. And it's in part to help the program run, but it's also because communities are it's nice for them to demonstrate there's some skin in the game, that they really believe that this is an important thing to do. And so that's how we've done it. But that is not as easy for some of the projects that have less funding. And so one of the things that we've done quite recently is we've created a fund to be able to waive that requirement for humanitarian software projects. And it's worked out really fantastically where um, since this was 2 rounds ago, so the last round and this round, we've added more than 10 new communities that are humanitarian. And that's great because it not only gives opportunities to people who are subject to systemic bias, but it also helps to help improve the body of software that is trying to do good work in the world as well. And as I said, this is likely to be our best round yet. Our biggest round yet, our best round yet. It's just going to get better and better. I don't know. We're going to do the best we can. We've got it's expanding is exciting, but it is also hard work. And what we're doing is, we can go to the next slide actually. And what we're doing is we're improving. Ever since the very first round, as Marina was saying, we've thought critically about how we were running the program and tried to figure out the ways in which we could do it better. So I think that not a single round has gone by where we haven't tweaked something in the program to improve it, and we'll keep improving it as we go. For example, recently created a guide for communities that wanted to participate in Outreachy. We cover topics like eligibility and mentor support so that they're set up for success in the program, how to avoid mentor burnout, and how internship funding works. And we're already aware of this documentation leading to an increase in community coordinators to help us out. So I'm hoping that over time, as we keep improving the program, we'll make it more stable and we'll find better ways to support our mentors and our interns. And of course, as part of that, we're hiring. We have on the Outreachy website, we have on the blog, we are hiring for a community manager. So if you think that this job might be for you, or you know someone who would be a good fit for this position, please definitely apply. We're going to try to move pretty quickly to hire someone. So don't delay, send in your application now. And I'm really excited to expand the staffing on the program, because you would not believe the workload it generates. But luckily with Sage and Anna and the other staff at Conservancy, I think we'll be great once we get our new hire, and that could be you.
So I would like to thank some people. We've already talked about Sage and Anna, who are making the program what it is today. Cindy Payares and Tony Sieber, they have served on the Outreachy's Project Leadership Committee. Rosanne DiMessio and Bradley Kuhn at Software Freedom Conservancy, and Rosanna Yen at GNOME Foundation, they have done a lot of administrative and finance work to keep the program going. So they've managed all the invoicing of our sponsors, and very importantly, they've managed all the payments that go out to our interns. So that's been a ton of work. And also would like to thank all the mentors and volunteers. Really, a lot of people volunteering their time to mentor the interns in the program is what makes the program happen. And you can learn more on our website at outreachy.org. Our next round is going to be launched in January. So January is going to be the time for new communities and mentors to sign up to offer internships, and also the time for applicants to apply for the program. If you're somebody from a group that's underrepresented in the technology industry in your country, if you don't have a full-time job, and perhaps if you haven't had an opportunity to be paid to work on free software, please consider applying for Outreachy. And also, if you know somebody like that, please encourage them to apply.
And I should say that the next round that starts functioning in January, but the next, we have a round that that's starting in December. But if you want to apply for the next round of Outreachy, the next round you can apply for will start in May, because our application, our initial application period is closed for this current round. but it's a good idea to get started early, actually. So I just want to thank you all for listening. I hope you have a few minutes for questions. Conservancy is a 501c3 nonprofit. Please consider donating to Conservancy and especially to Outreachy, so we can provide more of these great internships and support our staff. And then we've got a slide of some of the photo credits from this presentation. Oh, I see there's a chat thing. I don't know if we have time.
Great presentation, everyone. I definitely enjoyed listening to it as well as moderating for the presentation. We do have about 3 minutes if you want to go ahead and take any questions.
Yeah, we'd love to take questions.
If there are participants or out there, you can definitely use the Q&A feature or the chat to ask our panelists any questions that you have. And I see some persons leaving a lot of thank you and comments in the chat if you guys want to go ahead and see them.
Yeah, Karren, I don't know if you see the chat. There are two alums, Arcana and Mary, who have said hi and said that they appreciated Outreachy.
Oh, so nice. I recently asked if for people to give me some of their recent experiences to include in a grant report, and I got like some really nice tweets too, and toots.